Yeah, we're back for part 2 of the Violet Hold class set card review. We've got some nice little packages here today to take a look at. I think a couple of these do have a shot at being impactful with some pretty powerful standout cards, like actually this one right here behind me, the Spectre Specialist. This is 3 mana, 3/2. That's going to follow up on this Reborn synergy we saw teased yesterday with the legendary Wraith Van Geist. That's going to resurrect your minions that were reborn, or Haunt here as a way to give a minion reborn. You've also now got Spectre Specialist with this battle cry, give a friendly minion reborn. If it already has reborn, summon a copy of it, which that's pretty nice for a 3-cost card, I think. There are obviously just some great minions to have reborn. We talked about yesterday, like the Soothsayer, the big 6-drop prepare guy, and in Priest, like that's a fantastic card to give reborn to, a fantastic card to resummon with Wraith Van Geist. Also, if you manage to give it reborn with Haunt, you can create a crazy turn where it gets reborn, and then you create a copy of it instead with Spectre Specialist. Both of those copies, of course, will also still have reborn, which means when they die, they would then again be resummoned by Wraith Van Geist, attack in, heal you for 1 billion, and summon 6 drops that fill your board alongside Wraith Van Geist. So, you can imagine yourself like preparing a Soothsayer. That is the name of the card, right? Is that what it's called? What does he cost? He's 7 mana card, by the way, not a 6. I call him a 6-drop. I think he's 7, right? Yes. Did he get nerfed? I don't even remember. No way he got nerfed. Soothsayer, anyway, this guy's who we're talking about, right? That's a really interesting combo. Prepare this out, get it down, lead into a turn 6, turn 5 combo, whatever, with coin. Just over 2 turns even, there might be some possibilities here too, where you're just stacking up Soothsayers. And then I also think there's maybe like an aggro application here as well. You've basically got some like lower cost ways to start swarming the board with really sticky bodies. Get a 1-drop, a 2-drop down, play a Haunt on those. Something's going to stick around. Maybe you create a copy of it for the insane swing off Spectre Specialist, or maybe, you just get some more reborn stacks and just have like a really sticky little annoying board that hangs around for future haunts, right? And other plays. We're going to see even more awesome reborn dudes for the early to mid game here in this Priest package. So I think this actually looks really good. I think this has a lot of power. It's also a Ghostbuster, which is pretty silly. So next up here is the Lingering Spirit. This dude's kind of scary, I think. A 4-mana 3/3 undead with reborn. So this is kind of like an old piloted shredder right off the bat, right? Not quite as big, but a 3/3 that summons a 3/1. But this death rattle is particularly nice. Restore 3 health to your hero. Excess healing damages a random enemy. So sometimes that's just going to be like heal 6 to your hero, which some Priest decks will value anyway. Like that's totally cool, whatever. Like I'll take 6 in my slower Priest deck. Maybe that makes sense for some Priest decks. I don't know how much slower decks will embrace the reborn. It might have to be a little bit more mid-range to really lean into all this reborn stuff. But as soon as you're at full health, this becomes actually really powerful. Keep in mind, you can also buff your healing effects with that 4-drop. I just don't know the names of any cards anymore, by the way. I'm so sorry. The 4-drop that increases your healing. The Cleansing Cleric, right? Your healing effects restore 2 more health this game. At some point, this could be healing 7. If you're at full health, that means you're going to deal 7 to a random enemy. That could hit the opponent's face. Could clear a minion on board, right? And you get multiple stacks of this. So then you're talking about dealing 7 multiple times. And then, of course, you also get to summon this off Wraith Van Geist. If you've had 4 of these die, especially if you give the back halves reborn again, I think you could get like 2 per cycle, basically, because this does say minions that were reborn, not reborn minions. Remember, so like the second half would not inherently be reborn, but you can give it reborn with Haunt or our 3-drop, right? So in essence, you can have a Wraith Van Geist that summons 4 of these or something that are each dealing 7 damage to a random enemy, and they're going to be trading themselves in, right? And they're also going to leave those bodies behind. So if you like somehow cleared your board with, Medivh's Triumph or whatever, I think I actually got the name of that card right, you could have this insane OTK setup where you just like completely wipe out your opponent's board, right? So the opponent would need enemy minions for these to like attack into, but like we said, even if you didn't, you could still do the Medivh thing and like wipe all of these dudes out at once and hit like 28 to face. Now, like that's a pretty involved combo. You're playing multiple cleansing clerics, you're playing all these reborn dudes out, you're playing Wraith Van Geist. Like I don't know if that's actually going to manifest. I think just maybe from like, just think about these as a piloted shredder that's occasionally dealing 3 and like clearing your opponent's stuff, 3 damage extra to face. Like that's just like a good board presence. Again, like it's about developing this strong mid-game board that's just kind of piles of bodies. And now also this gives you sometimes anyway, answers to your opponent's stuff or kind of an anti-aggro speed bump too, where it's like, okay, face hunter, I'm healing 6 while still developing my board. I think that's a pretty cool plan. I think a lot of things there to be excited about, actually. So next up here is the Sinful Steed, a 3-mana 2/3 undead beast with Reborn, and this is Reborn with full health and enchantments, which we know that from the Dark Gifts. There's that one that has that same exact effect, which sometimes is really, really good. I've seen that multiple times, kind of catch me off guard with how powerful it felt, how sticky those minions can feel. This is inherently, just a 2/3, so not like that big a deal that it's Reborn with full health. But if you start buffing this guy, as soon as you start buffing this guy, this horse, then you get some crazy potential bodies out of this, right? And then also, of course, just playing into the Reborn aspects. Like if this sticks, the second half of this sticks, and then, you give it, Reborn again with your Spectre Specialist or whatever, or with your Haunt in particular, right? You're talking about now you've got a 4/6 that's going to get Reborn again, right, with full house. So it'll come back as a 4/6. Like leaving the second half of this on board with Haunt in play or Spectre in play becomes really risky for the opponent, where it's just like this, sticky, annoying thing that can start sacking up Haunts or any other buffs from Priest and go pretty hard, honestly. Now, the biggest challenge for this card is to me, like, I don't see as much support for this with Wraith Van Geist. Like, it's not a great Wraith card. So if you're like building towards Wraith, you almost wouldn't want this in your pool, maybe. I could see you trying to force higher quality stuff out of this. It does make sense from that tempo standpoint, but I gotta say, like, we've seen now 3 cards here that are all 3 mana, right? I think that's really tough. Spectre Specialist, Haunt, and Sinful Steed, and this at 4, you've got some really clunky turns there. You've got like no turn 2 lines, so you got to figure out something else to fill in the gaps, which actually we're going to see a turn 2 here, which is kind of good on turn 2, but also sort of wants to be played later as well, so like it's kind of shaky. Really not the best turn 2 play. This is not going to help either, which we'll talk about later. So it's like, but then, like you got a turn 3 and a turn 4, but then like on turn 5, you kind of break your curve again. It's a little bit weird where you can't play 2 3s, right? So, man, what I wouldn't give for this, for instance, to be a 2-drop, maybe it would be too good with this exact stat line or whatever. I don't know, but it's kind of butting heads. And I think you're probably just going to have to end up cutting some of this instead of going for like a full commitment to Reborn. So, this one does feel a little bit clunky, a little bit less high upside to me, despite, having an effect I think is good. It demands more follow-up and more commitment, basically. So next up here is Follow the Ghosts, which might actually have the goofiest art we've ever seen in Hearthstone. This just straight up looks like out of like a Disney cartoon or something. It's also, of course, Ghostbustery vibes, which that's this whole set. But anyway, 2 mana shadow spell here. Summon a 2/1 ghost with Reborn, and then give a playable card in your hand this effect for a turn, which I think means this is going to create a chain of sorts where every time you play that new card this same turn, it's also going to summon you a 2/1 Ghost with Reborn, and it's going to chain into another card in hand. So if you had a handful of 1-cost stuff, you might be able to, for instance, like, build out a giant board of 2/1 Ghosts with Reborn, while still playing your cards, drawing some stuff, buffing some stuff, whatever it is, right? So like you could have a turn 5 where you go Follow the Ghost, it hits the Haunt, and you get another 2/1 and the Haunt buff or whatever. Haunt's maybe not the best thing to give to a card that already has Reborn, but you get the idea. There are little chains possible, and it's specifically going to target playable cards, so that does help make sure you can create some reliable chains, I guess. It might still whiff on occasion, but you might be able to kind of nudge it into the direction that you want. Which, any card summoning a 2/1 Reborn as a bonus is fine, but I still don't think this is like a crazy payoff. And the moment it becomes really good with all the free stats would have to happen much later into the game, probably, than these 2/1s would have a super high impact for. Again, they kind of also poison the well a little bit for your Wraith Van Geist. like I think you're going to want to isolate him into bigger stuff, not a bunch of junky 2/1s, because I'm not sure those are all that useful. So in a weird way, this kind of fills that curve gap a little bit. It's definitely a higher tempo card, but I'm still like not seeing a lot of upside on this one. It's weird how I like kind of half of this Reborn package, but not the other half. And I could almost see them not really going together in a weird way, despite all being Reborn cards. I just kind of want to take the most powerful versions that by the way, work sort of agnostically against anything. You know, like you can use Haunt and Spectre Specialists with any cards like the Soothsayer, and then use your Wraith Van Geist to generate those. The actual like and this too is kind of its own little combo thing, but the actual like dedicated Reborn stuff with Sinful Steed and Follow the Ghosts, I feel like I'm going to end up leaving those behind just because the power level's not high enough. And I'd rather just, if I'm even going for a tempo game plan, would rather just play good tempo cards instead of these. So then finally here we have Slimum, 4 mana shadow spell. Once again, destroy all minions. So a monster reset here, and then each player gets a 3-cost spell that resummons theirs. So, you know, for Reborn cards in particular, you don't necessarily mind destroying your stuff. Might even be useful sometimes, like we saw with the Death Rattle guy. You're going to have a board left behind, but the opponent's gets wiped. And then even though they get a super cheap way to get that board back, you've basically bought yourself some time and maybe some board asymmetry so that your Reborn stuff can maybe like trade into the newly resummoned board from the opponent, or you just, you know, you're kind of baiting them into future removal potentially. Some definite applications there. I do wonder a little bit of like, is the stall enough sometimes, right? Like just delaying your problem for later isn't always a solution. But it on occasion it might be. Like we said, sometimes clearing the board to open up that face damage is a possibility. Just baiting into your turn 10 Medivhs or something, you know, in an emergency could be a possibility too. Usually that 3 mana spell is going to feel like a pretty efficient turn from the opponent, but it does kind of backlog all their other resources sometimes, where it's like, well, now I don't have anything else to do with my turn because I'm getting a mostly full board from this 3 mana spell. So you kind of putting everything on a 1-turn delay almost sometimes, as far as like putting the resources out are concerned. So like I kind of get it. There is also sort of a shortness of just really good removal in Hearthstone these days. So in some ways that too sounds pretty good for Slimum. So I'm like, I'm intrigued by this one, but at the same time, some decks just won't have the follow-up or won't have the moment in between this little gap here, this delay, to really capitalize on it. So they just won't be able to run this because it's like, well, it's just the same problem a turn later and I'm still losing, right? So it's going to take the right kind of deck to make sure they have basically the follow-up here that makes sense. So next up, let's move on over to the Rogue cards with the Stealth package. As you can see here, we have SI7 Supplier, a 2-mana 1/3 with Stealth, and after this attacks, draw a card. It's another like kind of stealth synergy here for Matthias Shaw, as we saw yesterday. Remember, whenever a friendly stealth minion attacks, reduce the cost. So you're looking for cheap stealth minions to play down first, bank them for a little bit, then slam Matthias so you get some big discounts. We also saw SI7 Slayer, same thing. You know, if you play a curve here of 2, 3, 4, when the SI7 Supplier attacks, she would actually be, is it 2/2? Yeah, she would be a 3/5. Which is pretty good, actually. Like, that's nice. It might even kind of get stuck a little bit, too, where the opponent has to prioritize what they want to kill on board, as long as they're unable to interact with these, which some decks do have a hard time interacting with stealth, particularly early in the game. So there are moments this could stick. We'll just talk more about these cards, right? Like, this is definitely card draw on a delay, and it's a really big delay if you're trying to build into the Matthias or Slayer follow-ups, right? Well, I guess Slayer you could kind of do immediately, but Matthias in particular is a really big delay. Generally, we like more instant card draw than delayed card draw, because if you're looking for resources, you need them now, not later. But I don't know, it's sticky enough and reliable enough that banking that draw for later is not a total disaster. So I've seen some like negative reactions to this stealth set. I'm a little more positive than most people, but I will acknowledge that like Rogue is a class historically, traditionally, that tends to play way better from hand than from board. And this kind of shift into like board and this delay on everything certainly makes me nervous. That said, like, I don't know, Matthias is a really big discount. Like, that's a mana cheat's always scary. finding him on time is hard, but I could see some pop-offs where this comes down early. You hit the perfect curve and you just blow people out with all these discounts, with the onboard buffs, etc. So like, I'm intrigued by this, but let's go ahead and talk about the rest of the cards to see if there's enough here for consistency, because that could really be the downfall. Is like, if you don't have the critical mass of stealth stuff, you're not going to have a reason to run this package, basically. So next up here is Silent Strike, a 2-mana spell. Dig this artwork, by the way. It's just like, it kind of has almost more old school Hearthstone painterly vibes instead of like full on digital vibes, which it is digital, I'm sure, but it just, I don't know, it's vibing with me. Like, it looks almost like it could have been 2016 Hearthstone or something. Anyway, give a minion +3 attack. If it's stealth, deal its attack damage to a random enemy minion. So I like that this basically gives you a little bit of a tempo recovery of sorts, where I'm playing this stealth stuff. I'm not really interacting much because my minions are staying in stealth. I'm saving them for Matthias or Slayer or whatever to create a big turn later. But this says, hey, if you've got a stealth thing, I'm going to let you bank even more upside later with this plus attack. So that thing becomes really, really threatening. And I'm going to give you, you know, the answer to something on board. Now, the question then becomes like, is this +3 attack so valuable that this is better than just any other deal 3 to a minion? Because Rogue has access to all kinds of 2-mana spells that can deal, 3 damage something or less, but also have some upside, like generating a card, for instance, with Herald, or imbue things. I think that one's deal 2, but you get the idea. It's like, I don't really think so, actually. I don't know if I care enough about the +3 attack. It's a nice buff if you're going face a lot. Like, sure, I get it, that's way more aggressive, but I don't know, the way Hearthstone's played these days, it's not quite that all into face for Rogue. Typically it's, well, I mean, it's more about like set up, and then pop off. You know, it's not about these like little incremental +3s. Stealth kind of does that, I guess, though. If you're thinking your stealth board is going to stick, it's like set up, and then hit everybody at once for a big hit. So again, I kind of get it, but I feel like my instincts are going to be to run the other 2-mana deal 3s that I have more control over. Number one, because this is random enemy minion, like that's super risky, and that upside of the value in hand or whatever other thing, imbue activations, whatever it is, right, just feels like it's going to go farther to me than this. So I don't really think this is the right follow-up for stealth decks. Next up is Tricks of the Trade, a 1-mana spell. It deals 1 damage, and if a stealth minion attacked while holding this, deal 3 instead, which of course can go face. Like, you know, this is fine. 1-mana deal 3 is great. Like, I could see a lot of spammy rogues running that, but they're gonna have to commit to having a stealth minion of some kind, and of course that minion has to resolve an attack, which I don't think it's like crazy challenging. Again, most decks don't really have ways to interact with these stealth minions all that well. I think one's going to attack, but sometimes, like, you know, top decking this without any stealth stuff in play could be kind of bad because you have to be holding it, right? So like, that's a little bit of a check on this. Also, it's just, again, it's like, I'm a little bit unsure that there's a reason to do all this, you know? It's just, it's gonna have to be good enough to put all this stuff in the deck and commit to this stealth package, because obviously you're gonna need quite a few stealth cards to want to run this. And I don't think this is necessarily like an incentive to do that. I think Matthias Shaw is the biggest incentive we've seen so far. But then again, also having cheap cards that you're holding in hand until your stealth stuff attacks is actually quite bad for Matthias Shaw, because he wants to increase, you know, things that probably cost 3 or sometimes even more. So it's like kind of weird to hold 1 cost cards in hand for your stealth. Like, so it's just like, I'm just like, kind of, but I don't think this one is the reason. Like, I'm just not excited about either of these 2 cards as sort of like follow-ups or payoffs or hooks or whatever for this package. So the next up is Follow the Footsteps, another follow card here, a 1-mana spell that reads, discover a stealth minion, give it this effect for a turn. So I think that means like basically on Battle Cry. It's kind of weird because it's not really a Battle Cry, but anyway, when you play the minion, it's going to give you the option to discover another stealth minion. And it's also going to chain. So, you know, if you discover a 1-cost stealth minion, play another one, right? You could basically get a board full of 1-cost stealth minions. I think these are going to chain anyway. That's my interpretation of the kind of follow the footsteps. Otherwise, we've already had wording with like the maps before where it would just say like, if you play it this turn, discover another or whatever. So I think the intent is to chain. So again, like random stealth minions, even with Discover Pool, like, you know, just not good enough, I don't think. And like the chains in particular, you're just not going to want to dedicate an entire turn to just playing a bunch of random stealth minions. Like, that's just value and bad minions for value's sake, which Rogue has plenty of ways to make great values with discounts. Like the stealth here, you're not really benefiting by the quantity of stealth. You're benefiting from the like timing of stealth. Not even really the quality, but more like the timing of the stealth stuff. This doesn't really help solve those problems. So I just don't think this card is very good at all, and I don't really see a reason to play this. So then our final rogue card here is Disguised Operator, another one of our disguised cards. 1 mana 4/2 can be played on either side. It has Rush, which is kind of cool, and Death Rattle. Your opponent draws 2 cards. So couple ways to use this, just a 1 mana deal 4 if you're desperate to clear something on board. That's cool, but keep in mind your opponent's going to get a lot of resources if you do. Not excited about that. Don't love giving people cards. It's probably less bad than it used to be in the old days because everybody has so many freaking cards these days that they go from 7 to 9. It maybe doesn't dramatically change your fate as opposed to the old days. If they went from like 2 to 4, that could feel like a huge difference in available resources, right? Percentage wise, it's like a 20% change instead of a 50% change or whatever, or it's 100% change, doubling, you know what I mean? So it's like 2 out of 7 is not 20%, by the way, I acknowledge, but you guys get the idea. You know what I mean? You understand what I'm saying. The proportion of the hand is different nowadays versus the old days. Anyway, you could use it as a mill card. We've got like this weird little mill package coming together in Rogue with a handful of different things like add cards to hand, draw them cards, etc. Don't think that's going to be a good deck, but technically a possibility. Now, alternatively, of course, you play this on your opponent's side. If you have a way to easily clean this up, an easy deal 2 or whatever, then you get to draw 2 cards. I don't really think that's that great either for Rogue, though, because Rogue has so many ways to draw and generate stuff. Having kind of a 2-card combo that requires you to play the guy and removal on it, that's sort of weird. If there was a really clean AoE for it, throw it into a spell damaged Fan of Knives, you might think that's totally worth it if you were doing that anyway, but otherwise you kind of have to double down on it, and that feels weird to me. Even if it would be relatively cheap, it's just like, it's not that exciting, right? So I think, again, this is kind of a hard card to play. I'm not really sure who's running this one. So moving on over to Warlock here, we've got this new Informant sort of deck going on, which makes a lot of sense in context of the Frame Job card that we saw yesterday, where you're discovering a minion in the enemy deck to put on top. Well, guess what? You're going to be putting Informants into the enemy deck with a number of these cards. And since they're in the enemy deck, when they are drawn, they will summon for you. It says for your opponent, but they're the one drawing them. So the opponent in that case is you. So you're going to be getting a bunch of like free 3/3 life steals summoned from your opponent's deck. Do keep in mind it does not disrupt their draw in that instance. They are summoned when drawn, so the opponent would still draw a normal card, which is relevant. But we got the Cabal Conspirator here, a 2 mana 2/3 Death Rattle. Put 2 3/3 Informants into the enemy deck. They summon for you when drawn. So just a River Croc to start, but you're loading up a bunch of Informants. Not much to say about this one. It's it's just a River Croc that's kicking off the deck. You've also got Harsh Sentence here. This is a 2 mana spell. Enemy minions cost 2 more next turn, and then put 2 3/3 Informants into the enemy deck. So a little bit of disruption here. That can definitely be annoying, breaking your opponent's curve a little bit, right? That's spicy, but no immediate tempo. Again, just kind of stalling them and setting up for later. I guess you're going to want the game to extend if you're kind of summoning all these Informants throughout a longer term game, hoping to maybe grind out the opponent. We also have the Corrupt Constable here. This is a 4 mana 3/5 Battle Cry. If the enemy deck has any Informants, move one to the top and give it +2/+2. So this is kind of forcing the Informant draw, which means when you play this on turn 4, assuming you've hit your Informants earlier, you're going to get a 3/5 and a 5/5 on board basically after your turn 4, which is pretty good. The 5/5 with lifesteal in particular, that's nice. Like shutting down some face stacks with an annoying lifesteal they got to deal with. I'm okay with that. It bugs me a little bit how parasitic this is, like literally referencing informants instead of like, you know, other things you might have shuffled in their deck or whatever, but it's fine. Like that's it works for this very, very dedicated package. We also have the Cabal Mastermind, 5 mana, 5/5, Taunt and Battle Cry. Whenever you summon an imp formant this game, give it +2/+2, which is pretty cool because you could have 2 of these, right? And this is a this game effect. So after you play your Cabal Masterminds, your imp formants are all going to be 7/7s with lifesteal, which that to me feels way more significant. Like you would worry like these 3/3s are never going to get there. Like, you know, who cares if I summon a couple 3/3s every turn from turns like 7, 8, 9 or whatever. It's just not going to have a big enough impact. You're summoning a couple 7/7s regularly, you start to think, okay, yeah, some of these might actually connect through to face. Face decks are going to get shut down with the lifesteal super hard. You're like, okay, yeah, I could see that. So it's just a question of like timing and consistency because, you know, we got one more card, I think, to talk about here because Kazakus doesn't really go in. This is Follow the Evidence, 1 mana, put a 3/3 imp formant into the enemy deck and give a playable card in your hand this effect for a turn. It's another follow card here where you're going to chain that. And this might be a way to put like, you know, 3 extra imp formants in the deck if you have a good turn to follow this up with enough cheap stuff, basically, to kind of chain it together. But you also, you know, this, if you have like, you know, if it's like turn 4 and you have 4 1-drops in hand, this could technically hit a 3-drop and kind of break your chain sooner than you'd like. So it just depends a little bit on deck construction, but you might have some more medium cost things in this informant deck. So I think the question for me becomes like, how many informants are you making this game? Let's say each of these makes like 2 or 3 on average. That's like 6 off your Follow the Evidences, right? These don't actually make any, they just buff them. So this is 2 informants, so that's like another 4 total. That's like 10 informants. This is just a way to you know, swing the board and get your informants. And then this is another 2 times 2 is another 4. So you're looking at like 14 informants total if you draw through all of these, which of course, you know, in a given game is going to end well before you draw through all of these. So you maybe have 8 informants in an average game, just making up numbers, right? Which won't actually be drawn organically all that often. That's, I think, the biggest issue is like, you're not really going to hit that many informants just like randomly, you know, and it's going to be super inconsistent when you do. So how many ways you have to force them, right? Like this forces a couple, Frame Job forces a couple, over 2 of them, you know, each of these have, you know, there's 2 instances of these. So you can only really force like 4, and that's again if you draw the cards. And by the way, Kazakus doesn't really seem to connect to this at all, I guess. I don't think he literally has any connection at all. He's just kind of a standalone, whatever. That's fine. I just think it's gonna be a big consistency problem here. Like some games it might high roll and you hit a few informants early and you just snowball, but I think the buffs from Cabal Mastermind in particular are coming down so late. You know, it's going to be like turn 5 and 6 if you play these in order. And it's like, I don't think, you know, I wish Frame Job was like a Twisting Nether I could play on turn 7 that did it. You know, instead of just destroying like 2 dudes and just getting me 1 imp formant. It just feels like this is all coming online a little late and a little slow and a little delayed. And you're like making a lot of bad turns along the way. And I just don't think this is a good enough win condition later. So in a lot of ways, I want to like this. I think it's pretty cool. I like lifesteal dudes. I think it's fun little, like, you know, chase trying to get your informants out and all that. Like, it's a cool design in some ways, but I just think the power level on this is going to be way, way too slow. I didn't even realize this was Death Rattle, by the way. My God, I think I thought that was a Battle Cry. I mean, Death Rattle's like technically give you extra synergies for it if you can resummon it or whatever, but that's not good. Like, you're not going to want to do that either. So, like, that's even on a delay, like a little risky. Like, I am just not, I just don't think this gets there, guys. I think Kazakus is a really cool standalone legendary that gets played. I don't think the informant stuff gets much of a whiff of playability at all. All right, so moving on over to Warrior for our final class here. We got the Cannon Master, a new 1 mana 3/1 Draenei Pirate. Get a 1/1 Cannoneer that deals 1 damage to a random enemy at the end of turn, which we saw the Cannoneer yesterday. Remember, this is going to deal a little ping at the end of turn. And then also Captain Crowley, who's going to summon those Cannoneers and make them even better. while he's on board. We also saw the hand cannon to make your cannoneers fire an extra shot, which should also make them fire an additional shot from Captain Crowley. So like you can kind of build a turn here where you have explode, and Cannon Master actually just gets you cannoneers that you can play. This is not summoning, it's just getting, but a really scary opener here is a 1-mana 3/1 that just maybe smacks the opponent a couple times. They don't have that good ping answer to it early. That's also setting you up for these cannoneer pop-offs potentially later. Maybe you play a cannoneer for tempo, maybe you save it for Crowley or your hand cannon. That's all a possibility. But still, like, this guy's pretty fast. Looks awesome, by the way. I love this this cool looking super official Draenei pirate guy. He looks awesome. That's why I used him in the thumbnail. I already made the thumbnail, so I know. So like, yeah, this is a really good opener for a fast pirate deck. Also, I should note some debate, I guess, if Cannoneer is a collectible card or not. The version I have and was given by Blizzard has the collectible gem, but I don't think it's going to be a collectible card. Like, I don't think you can run this in your deck. I think it is only a token. I don't know. They've been a little looser with the sort of gem stuff lately, so I don't really know, but I don't think you're collecting that one. Also, there's just too many cards in this package, and that would make sense. So anyway, that's Crowley, hand cannon, like we talked about. We also now have the Blast Powder Engineer, which this seems really cool. The 2-mana 2/3 pirate here reads, on your turn, friendly pirates deal 1 more damage. And that's going to be per instance of damage. So when you look at this with Cannon Masters, right, again, if you're thinking about like setting up a big explosive turn where you have all of this stuff hitting at once, like each one of their pings is now going to deal 2. But Crowley is giving them a separate ping, right? He's not like saying they deal 1 extra damage. So that means they're going to fire an additional shot that also now deals 2. Then you've also got hand cannon that makes them fire an additional shot if you load this up, which now makes them deal 2. So it's not like, 1 extra total. It's 1 extra per shot. And each shot you're triggering multiple times thanks to hand cannon and Crowley, again, if you set up that big turn. So if you also have the Blast Powder Engineer in play, or 2 Blast Powder Engineers, even if you could manage that, then you're talking about a lot of damage. On top of that, of course, is just the regular attack. Sometimes you might have some pirates. You just stick 3 or 4 pirates on board. This can be that big extra push, as we've seen with that priest card in the past. The good aggro priest card that made all your stuff deal 1 extra damage. Like, that was really, really scary sometimes. Now, of course, this is specific to pirates only, but if you're leading into a big old pirate deck, and wild format in particular, I could imagine this being just absolutely crazy broken, by the way. I think standard's going to be more measured, but I'm actually still seeing some hope for this package in an aggro build, even in standard format. So this actually looks like a really high-powered follow-up that doesn't have to necessarily play for combos, but could even just be good. You slot this in on turn 4 or 5 when you've managed to get a little bored. Maybe it's worth 2 or 3, 4 extra damage or whatever. And if you're an aggro deck that's trying to push down opponents, that might be really all that you need sometimes. So I think this looks pretty good. We've also here got the Hook and Heave, 2 mana, discover a pirate and summon 2 1/1 cannoneers, which you're probably not that excited about the discovering a pirate part. Like, it's fine. You're probably mostly excited here about the 2 1/1 cannoneers. I think that's really what the upside is on this, because you want to make sure you have a bunch of cannoneers just chipping opponents down. And, you probably aren't going to want to do all this with Crowley necessarily, because you're talking about 5 mana, 2 mana, 2 mana. Like, you're talking about a 9 mana turn for all of that already. It's possible if you want to save up for that. I think you're going to play these more incrementally throughout the game and just try to whittle people down basically, and take moments here, moments there, until eventually something is backbreaking. But I think this is pretty okay at that level. Like, the cannoneers aren't perfect. They're kind of like worse leeches from the old Death Knight leech package in some ways. But at the same time, they're different, right? Like, they can hit face themselves, they can trade in a little more effectively, but they deal a little bit less damage without follow-ups. They're more aggressively minded as opposed to defensively minded, but it's giving me similar vibes. And sometimes just having a lot of this little stuff to chip away at people can add up to be pretty intense. And discovering a pirate, again, not great, but just maybe keeps you refilling. You can find stuff like extra versions of Crowleys sometimes, etc., extra versions of your blast powder, things that naturally lead into this build. So might just keep the gears turning through that mid game or whatever until you finally find the right combination of stuff. On that note, we also have Land Ho here, a 4-mana spell. It's going to draw you 2 cards and summon you 2 1/1 Cannoneers, which is really just like that Leech card in DK. They just went and looked at all the Leech cards in Death Knight and were like, yeah, okay, yeah. Let's redo those. Now, I do think this one's, again, the 1/1 Cannoneers like fall off the more and more expensive it gets, right? Like if you're a deck that's trying to be more aggressive as opposed to defensive, 4 mana is a big old commitment to only get 2 dudes, right? And like, yeah, aggro decks need card draw, but sometimes they need it to be way cheaper than this. Like you're just like giving up a lot of pressure and the moment you play this. You're taking this kind of breather to give your opponent a moment to recover a little bit when often you want these decks to go harder. So it's like when are you're never playing this on turn 4 and happy about it, for instance. You might be playing this on like turn 6 or 7 when you get desperate. At that stage, are the Cannoneers even impactful enough anymore outside of some very random hits to face and stuff? It's like, I'd almost rather, I would definitely rather have like 2 Cannoneers that get added to hand and cost 0 as opposed to summoning them or something. So you could like still set up for a turn later or play them immediately if you wanted to. Because right now you're kind of like spreading yourself. You're spreading your Cannoneer threat on a turn when you're otherwise slowing down. And I think that's just going to be weird. And it feels like your Cannoneers kind of just don't do anything when you play this. And now you're just spending 4 mana to draw cards. And when you're spending 4 mana to draw cards, there's probably just going to be more efficient ways to draw cards that don't require half of their cost on something that's not actually going to be useful because you can't sync up the Cannoneers with everything else that you want to do, if that makes sense. Like, just give me cheaper alternative card draw and I'll just find the pressure elsewhere as opposed to kind of fusing these 2 things together that maybe don't really go together, if that makes sense. So then finally here for Warrior, we have Follow the Fuse, a 1-mana spell. This one deals 2 damage to random enemy and gives a playable pirate in your hand this effect for a turn. So again, a little chain here of 2 damage. If you somehow had a bunch of really cheap 1-cost pirates in hand, you set up with a Follow the Fuse, you play 3 or 4 1-cost pirates, and you deal 8 damage to the enemy in some way or another. Maybe it goes face, maybe it goes into their board. Obviously if it was 1 mana deal 8, you'd be like, yeah, sign me up, that's great. I'm a little worried how often that happens though. Like I talked about before, the playable card aspect, it's really nice that it targets playable, but sometimes it's going to hit something that's a little bit too expensive and you're not going to chain a bunch of 1-cost cards. You're going to get like 2 cards out of it. You're going to get this and 1 other dude, and you're like, shoot, I spent 1 mana to deal 4, which still kind of sounds efficient, but remember, it's random enemies. Sometimes it's just going to hit a random minion you didn't care about, or 2 damage to face when it didn't matter, and then you're giving up a slot in your deck, and you're giving up 1 mana to do something that maybe didn't really have that high of an impact. So how often are you going to create these chain turns where you're really doing something meaningful and really pressuring the opponent a ton? I have doubts that it's going to connect all that often. I think it's going to feel kind of clunky and low impact. That said, the Cannoneers are about overwhelming with pings and like little chip damage, and they can clean up bad math. So I don't know. I'm torn. There's parts of this package that I think are really cool, and I can see some really, really good turns. And I kind of like Crowley almost even as a standalone card sometimes. He's just sort of a pile of stuff. A really bad Dr. Doom or something is a way to, or Dr. Boom. My God, Marvel Snap Brain. It's kind of like, kind of a bad Dr. Boom, but other times I think it's just there's not going to be the critical mass you need on this, like it's just not all going to sync up fast enough or in time. I don't know if there's enough aggressive pirate stuff right now to really get this over the line. So I'm kind of torn on this package. There's a part of me that thinks it's going to come together and be pretty scary and good, and there's a part of me that thinks it's just going to fizzle out. So all that said, let's go ahead and rate all of these cards from 1 to 5 stars. Spectre Specialist is a 4-star card. Wraith Van Geist is a 4-star card. Haunt is a 4-star card. Lingering Spirit is a 4-star card. Sinful Steed is a 3-star card. Follow the Ghosts is a 3-star card. Slime'em is a 3-star card. SI7 Supplier is a 2-star card. Matthias Shaw is a 3-star card. SI7 Slayer is a 3-star card. Silent Strike is a 2-star card. Tricks of the Trade is a 2-star card. Follow the Footsteps is a 1-star card. Disguised Operator is a 2-star card. Cabal Conspirator is a 2-star card. Frame Job is a 2-star card. Harsh Sentence is a 2-star card. Corrupt Constable is a 2-star card. Cabal Mastermind is a 2-star card. Follow the Evidence is a 1-star card. Godfather Kazakis is a 5-star card. Cannon Master is a 4-star card. Cannon Master is a 3-star card. Captain Crowley is a 4-star card. Hand Cannon is a 3-star card. Blast Powder Engineer is a 4-star card. Hook and Heave is a 3-star card. Land Ho is a 2-star card. Follow the Fuse is a 2-star card. And there you go. Yeah, I mean, the reviews on this is weird because these packages go together so parasitically and like so much that like a lot of the scores are going to just sync up, right? Like good Reborn stuff's all 4 stars for Priest or whatever, you know, some of it gets left out, it's a little lower, etc. Warrior, I'm like really torn on. I gave it like, you know, I would have liked to have basically taken half a star off every Warrior score if I could do I've never done half stars. I don't do half stars, but like if you took half a star off each of these, I would feel better about the scores because I'm like really torn on Warrior. You know, if I was like life or death and had to tell you if it's good or bad, I would say it's not going to be good. Like that would be my, you know, like my instinctual like gut take, but I don't know, like I'm trying to be a little more hopeful or positive on these because I think there's at least a slight chance. You know, these cards are, this is kind of a good card, I think, right? Anyway, share your thoughts on all these cards down below. Thanks much as always for watching, and until next time, game on.